Hello and welcome to the Progressive Brat YouTube channel. My name is Ariana and today I want to give a full analysis on the situation in Afghanistan right now. I know I gave a pretty quick hot takes type video. I will link it up above here. I kind of went over my preliminary thoughts and opinions, a very basic timeline of what had happened and what my commentary was on that. But now that the week has passed by, I do want to really do a deep dive, and I understand that this situation is very complicated, and if I wanted to really go into the history and before 2001, this video would probably take 6 hours. But I want to give an analysis of all four of the US presidents that were running, and they were serving as president in the US, and this war was going on under their presidency. So if you want to see more videos like this with my commentary, please don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. I do videos like this all the time and I upload regularly. So if you want to keep up to date to my progressive brat thoughts, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Starting off with my analysis, I want to go over what happened, how every president kind of played in the situation, and where we're at now and what this really means for the Afghans, not just like as a civilization, but as a country as well. I know that they're going into a very long-lasting humanitarian crisis, and it's really important on shedding light on what we can do for them, as well as also analyzing the situation and how we could have really done better and where we could have done better in this whole scenario. I apologize if I keep looking down. I have my laptop and all of my sources / notes in front of me, and I just want to make sure all of the information that I provide is accurate and well sourced. All of the information that I have is from well-known news outlets, and I will list them down below in the description box. So as of right now, while I'm filming this video, the Taliban has taken over all of Afghanistan, including the Kabul airport. It seems like no airlines are flying in and out or even over Afghanistan unless they are American military type flights. This is a result of the US pulling out of Afghanistan, which we all knew was originally a Trump administration plan, but carried out by the Biden administration. Also, Trump was talking to the Taliban and trying to cut deals with them, so to speak, in order to pull out of Afghanistan. But he has taken off all proof of that from his official website a couple days ago. There's some fears that come from this. So one of them is the fact that the Taliban is a corrupt sovereignty, I guess you can call them, and they're mostly funded by the opium fields within Afghanistan. So that is a very big source of concern, the fact that they're practically like a Islamic extremist drug cartel, if you'd like to word it that way. But the fact that women's rights is now compromised, they're in serious danger. Many fear that it'll go back to the extremist ways that it was from 1996 to 2001. Although the Taliban has said that they're going to take more of a moderate approach this time around. Women were stoned, hung, they were not allowed to go to school, they were forced to marry, and other misogynistic laws like that. During the time that Taliban ruled the first time around, and from 1996 to 2001, only 3 countries recognized them as a government. One of them was Pakistan, another one was Saudi Arabia, and another one was the United Arab Emirates, otherwise known as Dubai. All of this begs a couple of questions. It begs the question of national security and international terrorism. What will the world look like when the Taliban rules Afghanistan? Do they only care to rule that area, or are they trying to expand? But with all this being said, I want to provide some commentary on the events as a Middle Eastern woman, specifically a Middle Eastern woman that was born and raised in America during the post 9/11 era of Islamic hate, I guess you can say. Should the US have been in Afghanistan in the first place and stayed for 20 years? You know, what kind of role did the Afghan security have in this failure, and what role did other countries play, like Pakistan, the UK, and more? Which US presidents are to blame? George W. Bush, President Obama, President Trump, or President Biden? And we should have, you know, I mean, George Bush started the war, Obama aided and abetted it, Trump negotiated with the Taliban, and now Biden exited, but his exit strategy was incredibly lacking and terrible, in my opinion. After September 11, 2001, the US forces retaliated in September 18, 2001. That's pretty much, the war pretty much started in October of 2001, and it dragged on until practically now. In 2020, so as of last year, this war cost the US about $2 trillion of debt. This is the Iraq and the Afghanistan war combined, but this money was all debt financed. So by 2050, the interest on this money will make it $6.5 trillion of the US being in debt. The Pentagon also informed Biden that the potential for the Taliban to take over Afghanistan was real and imminent, but they actually predicted that it would take 18 months and not a couple of weeks. Personally speaking, I don't think anyone expected the Taliban to take over this fast, but you know, that's also up for debate. They also tried to talk Biden out of it, so the Pentagon was really enforcing and trying Biden to not do this. They knew it was going to be a national and international disaster, but Biden still went through with the pullout. There were also other factors when it comes to this whole entire catastrophe. According to the New York Times, the Afghan forces, including corruption, I mean, putting corruption aside from the Afghan government, that was very prevalent. The soldiers and police officers were unpaid. They lacked food and water for months prior to the pullout. So how do you expect a military group to fight off the Taliban if they're not even getting food or water? That's also a huge question that we have to ask, and I personally believe it's a huge part of why the Afghan military was so quick to also surrender. I mean, if they're not getting paid, if they don't have food, if they don't have shelter, well, the first thing that they're most likely going to do is run, and that's exactly what they did. But if this was the plan for the past 2+ years for Biden and Trump to leave Afghanistan, which it evidently was, this was their plan for a very long time, from both the Biden and the Trump administration, why didn't they have a comprehensive plan in their exit? So from what I saw, the exit was executed very terribly. And I don't think the argument here is whether they should have left or whether they should have stayed. The argument that I want to make is that the way they executed could have been a lot better than the way it was done. Yeah, that's just my opinion though. According to the New York Times, President Biden told National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan that he was convinced that no matter what the US ends up doing in this situation, Afghanistan is almost certainly headed towards an unpreventable civil war. That statement is also questionable in my opinion, but we'll keep it moving. In a release from Biden, Joe Biden blamed Donald Trump for a part of this disaster. And he claimed that he inherited a very terrible deal cut by President Trump and his predecessor, so to speak. Biden said that he had two choices: to either ramp up the US presence and send more troops, or abide to the deal set previously by Trump. And obviously he picked the second option. On the other hand, former President Obama promised withdrawal of all troops by 2016 in Afghanistan. Clearly, we see that that did not happen. But Obama also faced pressure from the Pentagon and Congress, so he actually came up with an illusion that the American troops still in Afghanistan would stay out of the fight with work that put them on the sidelines, right? So when we're talking about these jobs that, you know, Obama said that they were doing, we're talking about jobs that are not non-combative, like more volunteer service type work to help the civilians. This false narrative was a complete facade. The Pentagon created many exemptions that in reality required U.S. fighter bombs to fly along with helicopters and drones, which carried out contact missions. Ground forces were carrying out quote-unquote counterterrorism operations or raids that were also exempt from the non-combative rules. So in reality, we were still in combat, but it was marketed to us that we weren't. This caused the US to continue to play a huge role within the Afghanistan War and the continued fight to keep this quote-unquote end of combat, image or facade, if you will. The Pentagon continued to aid this rhetoric by providing upbeat reports about the U.S. presence in Afghanistan, which were mostly completely false and fabricated. But on August 1st, after 35-year-old Sergeant Andrew McKenna's death and the October 3rd, 2015 cannon fire at the Kunduz Air Hospital ran by Doctors Without Borders, which killed 42 innocent civilians, doctors, and patients, the illusion that the Obama administration had created came crumbling down into pieces, and Obama apologized for the catastrophes. There were 8,400 troops remaining in Afghanistan after he left office in January 2017. For former President George Bush, the 9/11 Twin Tower attacks was mainly the reason why we invaded. He said that it was an act of terrorism and that we needed to protect ourselves from the Taliban. But part of his problem was that the objective started to expand, with his wife, Laura Bush, making Afghan women's rights her first priority. She said, and I quote in a radio interview in 2001, that civilized people throughout the world are speaking out in horror, not only because our hearts break for the women and children in Afghanistan, but also because in Afghanistan we see the world the terrorists would like to impose on the rest of us, end quote. I want to address her quote really quickly before I move on to the rest of my analysis. There's a lot to unpack here. She was quoted saying, civilized people throughout the world. So just because, I'm sorry guys, this quote really bothers me on so many different levels. So are Afghan women and Middle Eastern people uncivilized and lower than human to Laura Bush just because they don't confine to her definition of freedom or livelihood? The fact that she as a white woman felt so comfortable to make this her whole entire meaning in life and felt so comfortable saying that civilized people around the world are worried for Afghan women. I mean, it just really shows how completely out of touch, how racist, and how illiterate she really is. That's really where I'm just gonna end it, because Middle Eastern women have never asked for white feminism, and I promise you we never will. And let's also not forget Democrat Congresswoman Caroline Malady, who also took the stage in Congress wearing her version of a full-blown burqa to speak on the behalf of oppressed Middle Eastern women. Let me be very clear when I say this. Middle Eastern women will and never want this type of convoluted, racist feminist representation. We don't. Your white feminism is actually very, very, very condescending and rude towards us. Please do not wear a burqa in front of national TV as a white woman, claiming that you're there to fight for Afghan women. What do you know about Afghan women or their culture? If it was an Afghan woman standing in front of Congress speaking about her country and her rights, that's something else. But you as a white woman going in front of Congress like that, that's a national disgrace. That is a national disgrace. Now, throughout Bush's presidency, Bush continued to push two rhetorics. One, that this was not a war of choice and that we had to inevitably invade because of the Twin Tower attacks. And two, we are doing it for the women of Afghanistan and their liberation. He also repeated that the people who are responsible for 9/11 are plotting to do other attacks, as well as this is a matter of ongoing national security, also really adding to the whole era of 9/11 Middle Eastern is Muslim, just general hate. But I really want to talk about 9/11 for a second, since this is a central point of this conversation. Earlier this month, 9/11 families wrote an open letter to Joe Biden, and they asked him to not attend any of their memorial events that they had planned this year. This group, which consists of about 1,800 people who were directly impacted by 9/11, believed that Saudi Arabia had a huge hand in these attacks. Biden promised transparency on this issue when he ran for office, but he has yet to release the documents on this matter. So if Saudi is a part of the 9/11 attacks, which by the way, this group says that they have proof of, and there have been FBI agents that have corroborated this claim. If this is true, and we went into a 20-year war with Afghanistan over something Saudi may have had a huge part in, why are we still best friends with Saudi Arabia? And let's just put this aside, right? Let's put this point aside, right? Let's talk about the US politicians that profited personally off of war in general. I want to bring up a representative, and there are many representatives. I'm going to link the article down below that calls out all of the general politicians that tend to invest hundreds and thousands of dollars in mass companies that create weapons of mass destruction. Dianne Feinstein is one of them as well. I want to talk about Ro Khanna real quick. And it is because Ro Khanna is a self-proclaimed Democrat. He actually represents a portion of the Bay Area. And, you know, he likes to think of himself as kind of part of the whole Bernie Bro squad, right? So he invested $376,000 in Boeing, Honeywell, Huntington Ingalls, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, and United Technologies. In 2019, Democrat Dianne Feinstein of California invested $650,000 in Boeing. Democrat Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island invested $348,998 in Boeing, Raytheon, Honeywell, and United Technologies. Republican John Hoyven, sorry if I butchered your last name, invested $250,000 in Honeywell. This list goes on and on and on. 90% of all sales from Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and General Dynamics went to deals with Saudi Arabia. This part of my analysis genuinely makes me emotional, because, and as a political commentator, I try to keep my emotions out because there were many, many, many players in this. This was a proxy war. There were many countries. I really wanted to focus my analysis on the US politicians and how they had a huge role in this disaster, if you will. US politicians became million and billionaires off of the Afghanistan War. Not just the Afghanistan War, the Yemen War, the Iraq War, the proxy war in Syria. They invested in many of these companies that produce weapons of mass destruction, and they reaped the benefits of their investments. Any politician that invested in these war weapons of mass destruction providing companies have Middle Eastern blood on their hands. People like Dianne Feinstein, Ro Khanna, Sheldon Whitehouse. If you make your money off of the bloodshed of Middle Eastern people, I don't really know what to say to it. You know, you try to really look at the US politics in a critical way. I like to consider myself as an independent. You know, both Democrat and Republicans have done their fair share of dues, so I like to be critical of both sides. But the honest fact that most of these politicians have made a lot of their wealth off of the bloodshed of Middle Eastern people genuinely makes my heart hurt. And you know, not only that, but the way that Joe Biden pulled out his speech was incredibly hollow. He put blame on the Afghans. He put the blame on the Afghan government. He blamed Donald Trump's previous deal. He took no credit. And he didn't talk about the humanitarian cost of this war. There are many people within Afghanistan that are trying to immigrate now, and they are trying to flee essentially, but they're having trouble getting to the tarmac or to the airports. We saw videos of people falling off of the airplanes, of people raiding the tarmac. This is going to leave a humanitarian crisis that's going to go on for a very, very long time. Most likely for our whole entire lifetime. And really putting our focus on the Afghan women, the Afghan children, the Afghan people, making sure we pull them out, making sure that we continue to talk about them, making sure that we do everything that we can, like contacting our representatives and making it known that we want to take them in as refugees. Doing all of that is very important. When will the time be where we stop going into wars? I don't know. I think as long as these politicians continue to invest in these companies, we're going to have this issue. Human beings tend to be very self-serving, and clearly American politicians are a great example of that. Hope and pray for a day where US politicians will be politicians because they genuinely want to serve and help their population, rather than becoming self-serving multi-millionaire clowns hiding behind the fake facade of a politician. Politicians like Ro Khanna, who brand themselves as progressives, but invest so much money yearly in war crime companies, do not deserve a spot. In my opinion, that is. Will a day come where US politicians will not personally profit off of war? Who knows? The wars that America joins have now become a part of our economy. The death of Middle Eastern people has become a part of the American economy. And I implore all of you to read the prospect.org article that I have linked down below, and to understand how much of a hand US politicians have in this mess. Middle Eastern blood and lives are expandable to American politicians as long as it means that they receive their money and their funding. Let's just hope that one day it changes, and let's hope that President Biden does a better job for the Middle East, because the way he pulled out of Afghanistan was an absolute disaster. And it is his moral obligation to take in as many refugees as he possibly and humanly can. Because you reap what you sow. He was vice president for 8 years before he became president. And yet he chose to do nothing. He chose to keep up the facade that we are doing humanitarian work in Afghanistan, when in reality we ended up murdering 42 people at a Doctors Without Borders hospital. Doctors Without Borders hospital. So yeah, do better, because this was an absolute catastrophe. We should have taken out the refugees before we even decided to pull out. Please continue to speak for the Afghan women, for the Afghan children, for the Afghan population. Continue to spread awareness, continue to contact your local representatives, go to any protests that are planned, and just pray that one day we live in a moral and ethically better world, I guess. Moral and ethical world, I guess you can say. My name is the Progressive Brat, or otherwise known as Ariana. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. I would love to hear your guys' opinions on my analysis. Even if you just decided to stay here for a couple of minutes and view my commentary, I still appreciate it. Y'all have a wonderful day, and I will see you soon.